Hey guys, let's talk a little bit about how to build relationships at work and why they matter. So let's first start with why relationships matter. So why would you want to be deeply close to David Brent and the crew from the British Office? Well, perhaps you don't, but I will say that building relationships with coworkers is really valuable. For one thing, it makes your time in the office a lot more pleasant. So during the course of the day, there's going to be pretty significant downtime at times. There's going to be lunch breaks. There's going to be times in between meetings, in between heads down work that you'll have to really talk and develop rapport with your coworkers. And if you feel like you're close to them or you like them or you care about them, your time in the office is going to be a lot more gratifying. More so, it's actually really helpful to help you acquire new skills or be a part of new interesting projects. If people in the office know you and they're thinking about someone who they want to be on lead for a project or participate or get involved, if you have relationships at work, it's far more likely that you'll be asked to do it. Also, the more people you have, the more exposure you'll have to different skill sets. So perhaps one of your coworkers is a master at Excel, or perhaps they're great at designing presentations, and you become friends with them. It's really easy to ask, like you would a friend, hey, would love to learn a little bit more about what you're doing. You can really gain some valuable skills that way. Lastly, it's really important for future job-related opportunities. Back in 2016, they did a study and they found out that about 70% of hires were made through connections. So people who knew places at organizations have a huge advantage in terms of getting a job. So it's really important when you're working to really develop relationships, especially if you're working within an industry or in a functional area that you might actually want to pursue more seriously in the future. I do want to make a quick distinction between strong ties and weak ties. And this is a term that was developed by a psychologist, and there's a lot of theories being postulated in the past decade that it's really important actually to have weak ties. So a weak tie is people that you have maybe a shared cultural background or a shared experience, or you've met them a handful of times. Whereas strong ties are your family, your closest friends, and in a work capacity, perhaps your boss or the coworker that you work really close to. I do think it's really great to prioritize forming a few of those more substantial relationships. And you can identify a few individuals who you connect with or whose work you find particularly inspiring and try to develop some stronger ties. But I also think within the course of an internship, you have a really great opportunity to develop weak ties. And weak ties can be generated from asking a coworker to coffee, even having small rapport and talking to them while they're at the coffee machine. Those are really great ways for you to develop weak ties. And if you potentially in the future wanted to get hired and you were connected to somebody, you can get connected to somebody who's a weak tie previously. And I think something that's really important to discover and talk about is how do you start building relationships at work? Because you're not going to go from never interacting with them to their best friend. And I know in certain offices it can be quite daunting, depending on the company culture and the layout of the office, to start interacting with your coworkers. So before you start building relationships at work, I think it's really important to understand what the dynamics are of the office. If you're working in an Asian organization, is it common for a young intern to be interacting and trying to befriend the CEO? Likely, almost unilaterally, no. In Silicon Valley, in a lot of different industries that are perhaps more tech, design, focused, becoming friends even as interns or developing warm rapport with coworkers is far more common. So before you start reaching out, asking for coffee, first and foremost, take a look around, understand the culture of the place. But then I would encourage you to engage in water cooler talk, which is an old term that refers to the types of conversation that coworkers would have as they're grabbing a cup of coffee or hanging out by the water cooler. And so what you're going to want to do in these kind of conversations is if you wander up to the water cooler, you see a couple of people who are working and they don't seem particularly busy. So I would encourage you to introduce yourself to them. Let them know that you're the new intern, ask them what projects or teams they're working on, and reciprocate with them. The next time you see them, you can engage in conversation about maybe some more personal things. What did you do over the weekend? What are your plans for the weekend? These are really common conversations in a work capacity that I encourage you to have to start developing some of those weak ties. Strong professional relationships often have a personal foundation. So conversations that revolve around interests and personal interests can actually be a really great place to start. And eventually those conversations can turn into ones that are valuable professionally, whether those people are actually teaching you skills or even connecting you to other companies or employers in the future. I would say if you find a coworker's work particularly inspiring, I would really encourage you to ask them out for a walk or set up an informational interview. And informational interviews are in short a really safe space to ask questions and gain firsthand experience of a work that interests you through somebody who's a practitioner, typically in that field. So we have a series of resources in the hub that I encourage you to read if you're interested in conducting informational interviews. It talks about what are best practices, such as be prepared, don't come with easily Googleable questions, and do your homework, study up on industry lingo, etc. There's lots of resources that I would encourage you to look at. The whole point of an informational interview is to come across in a way that would inspire someone else to help you in the future. So typically you don't set up an informational interview thinking that the next day they're going to offer you a job, but rather you're laying the foundations of a friendship that again could possibly be useful in the future. And if nothing else, you're learning something really valuable about careers. So I would definitely encourage in the course of your internship to set a goal, and even a SMART goal, to allude to a different video, in which you say, I'm going to set up 4 informational interviews with someone on the product team, the marketing team, the engineering team, and the creative team. Because those are the 4 areas I'm really interested in, and I want to ask a series of thoughtful questions about why they enjoy their work, how they got into their line of work, what's changing within their industry, to help me make a career decision myself. And lastly, I think it's really valuable to find mentorship. And when I say that everyone has a mentor, I'm also fully aware that not everyone's willing to be a mentor, nor will everyone find a mentor in every organization. But I think that the more informal conversations you have, the higher likelihood is that you'll be able to find someone that you connect with who could potentially turn it into a mentor of yours. And a mentor's role could be very varied, but they can help you perform better at your job, explain the intricacies and tricks of the profession, be a role model, and even open professional doors with you. So just like Mr. Miyagi in The Karate Kid, a classic American film, finding someone who's a seasoned person in the industry you want to go can be really valuable as you're starting out in a career. So strong ties, weak ties, mentorships, informational interviews, and just plain enjoyment in the office are really valuable reasons why you should form relationships with the people that you work with.